المقاومة لا تستطيع أن تقف مكتوفة الأيدي ويكشف ظهرها.
ليس حزبا لبنانيا ولكنه فرقة إيرانية.
Good afternoon. It is Friday, May 28th. I'm Yuna Nofal, and these are today's headlines. An attack on a military checkpoint in the eastern border town of Adsail leaves 3 soldiers dead, sparking anger from Lebanese politicians. Arab Democratic Party chief Rafat Ali Eid accuses President Michel Sleiman of failing to properly tackle the situation in the northern city of Tripoli. Syria's opposition leaders react cautiously to a new EU decision that will end the arms embargo on Syrian rebels. Excuse me, I said it was Friday. It is actually Tuesday. 3 soldiers today were killed overnight in an attack on their checkpoint in the town of Wadi Hmed in the eastern border town of Adsail. A group of gunmen in a black jeep assaulted an army checkpoint and clashed with the soldiers at 3:30 a.m. this morning, according to a communique issued by the army commander. The statement pointed out that the army is carrying out a wide search operation in the area to detain the armed men who fled to the nearby outskirts. Army units in the area were on high alert swiftly after the incident. 2 Lebanese soldiers were killed in February when members of an armed group ambushed their patrol that was in the area of Adsail to pursue a suspect wanted on terrorism charges. Arab Democratic Party chief Rafat Ali Eid accused President Michel Sleiman of failing to properly tackle the situation in the northern city of Tripoli. He said during a press conference, quote, "The unrest in the city will spread throughout Lebanon if the situation is not addressed." He added Sleiman is not supporting Army Commander General Jean Ahwajeh, but he is dragging him into the Tripoli unrest in order to stop him from taking his place as president. Eid explained that fighters from Tripoli's Jabal Muhsin's neighborhood were forced to wage a battle in the city on May 21st after the provocations against it became unbearable. In addition, he stated that the fighting intensified in Tripoli after gunmen that were seeking to take part in battles in Syria's Al-Qusayr region decided to return to the city and take part in the clashes. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri warned that the deadly attack in Adsail signals further dangers in Lebanon. He called for the attack a heinous crime and stressed it is not only being denounced and rejected by all Lebanese, but it is also an indicator of upcoming dangers that will target national peace. Hariri also called on all political groups to be vigilant and to stay away from ongoing acts to drag Lebanon into the fighting in Syria. His statement comes after he offered his condolences in a telephone call with Lebanese Army Commander General Jean Ahwajeh and underlined his support for the army. A girl was killed and another was wounded when 4 rockets fired from Syrian territory hit residential neighborhoods in the Bekaa city of Hermel on Monday. Lulu Awad, who is 17 years old, was martyred, and another woman from the same family was also wounded by the rockets that targeted residential neighborhoods in Hermel. The rockets also caused major material damage. Maronite Patriarch Shaddai reiterated that Sorry. This is not, okay. Maronite Patriarch Shaddai reiterated the Parliament should approve a new electoral law ahead of any technical term extension. Arai pointed out that extending the Parliament's tenure without the approval of a new electoral law would be a disgrace after 6 years of discussions. His announcement comes a day after the Maronite Bishops' Council stressed the need for political powers to reach an agreement over a new parliamentary electoral law. They also rejected the extension of Parliament's mandate without an agreement over a new vote. The support for the extension of the legislator's term that expires on June 20th began growing after the rival parties failed to agree on a new electoral law despite the adoption of the orthodox plan by the joint parliamentary committees. Caretaker Interior Minister Marwan Sharbil said that a law on the extension of Parliament's 4-year mandate should include an article on the recent announcement of candidacies based on the 1960 law. Sharbil suggested the extension law should give the candidate the choice of keeping his nomination or withdrawing his candidacy. The remark comes when the Interior Minister was asked about the fate of around 706 candidates if the elections were postponed. Speaker Nabih Berri is likely to call for a parliamentary session on Thursday to vote on an 18-month extension after the rival parties failed to agree on a new electoral law that would replace the 1961. However, other parties are backing a 6-month extension. The EU has voted not to renew the arms embargo on Syria, freeing Britain and France to decide whether or not to arm the rebels starting this August. Britain and France achieved what they wanted out of a marathon negotiating session in Brussels, but it was at the expense of EU unity. The refusal of the two countries to renew the arms embargo could have caused the collapse of all EU sanctions against Syria, embarrassing the EU and handing a victory to President Bashar al-Assad. However, EU ministers averted such consequences by reinstating all of the economic sanctions. Spokesman for Syria's main opposition national coalition, Luay Saifi, said the EU's new ability to arm rebels is a positive step forward, but one that came a little too late. Russia, in turn, slammed the EU agreement, saying it undermines the chances for the U.S.-Russian peace conference underway. Russia said it will go ahead with deliveries of S-300 anti-aircraft missiles to Syria to help deter foreign intervention.
Member States will not proceed at this stage with the delivery of the equipment mentioned above. The Council will review its position before the 1st of August 2013 on the basis of a report by the High Representative after having consulted the UN Secretary-General on the developments related to the US-Russia initiative and on the engagement of the Syrian parties. All positions on this are really honourable because everybody is trying to work out how best to support the people of Syria and how best to ensure that we get to a political solution as quickly as possible. And what I saw around the table, and the reason it went on for so long, was a strong desire for the European Union to come together and put together a position that I've read out to you. Now, within that, you're quite right to point to the fact that member states may take different decisions. That doesn't mean that we've lost the capacity to have a common policy. What it does mean is there's a recognition that in trying to establish how best to support the people of Syria, countries will want to make some decisions, but within a framework that I've described to you in the context of what I read out on Section 2 of being a European framework.
The European Union has agreed to bring to an end the arms embargo on the Syrian opposition and to maintain other sanctions on Syria, all the other existing sanctions on the Syrian regime. This is the outcome that the United Kingdom wanted. It has been difficult for many nations, of course. That is why we've had such long discussions today over the last 12 or 13 hours or so. But I think it is the right decision.
Republican Senator John McCain, a former presidential candidate and an outspoken advocate for U.S. military aid to the Syrian opposition, met with some of the rebels during a surprise visit to the war-torn country. This makes the senator the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Syria. General Salem Idris, who leads the Supreme Military Council of the Free Syrian Army, said McCain's visit comes at a critical time for the rebels, who have stepped up their calls for U.S. support, including heavy weapons, creating of a no-fly zone and airstrikes. McCain's visit comes as a French official plans to divulge the results of a chemical weapon report in the next few days. The French official, who was speaking after talks among U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, as well as French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, said the three ministers had agreed that any use of chemical weapons would be a game changer. Coming up next, firefighters in China rescue a newborn baby stuck in a sewage pipe connected to a toilet. Stay with us. Welcome back. As EU foreign ministers met in Brussels, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met in Paris to discuss the possibility of a peace conference focused on Syria. The U.S.-Russian initiative provides the first slim hope in almost 1 year for a diplomatic end to a conflict that has cost more than 80,000 lives and caused a refugee exodus that the UN Refugee Agency expects to top 3.5 million by the end of this year.
Russia, the United States, are deeply committed and remain committed to trying to implement the Geneva I principles, which require a transitional government by mutual consent that has full executive authority in order to allow the people of Syria to decide the future of Syria. We are committed to this. We both want to make this conference happen, if possible, together with many other countries that have joined up. And today we talked through a number of issues. When the conference might take place, and obviously that depends on the participants and the decisions that need to be made together with our friends and allies and the United Nations. We talked about the participants, and that is an ongoing conversation, and it will continue tonight with Foreign Minister Fabius. We also talked about the humanitarian situation, and both of us expressed our mutual concerns about any potential use of chemical weapons and the need to really get the evidence and ascertain what has happened in that regard. Both Russia and the United States, if it were being used, object to that very, very strongly.
We discussed how we can proceed with the kind of division of labor which we agreed in Moscow to persuade various Syrian parties and the foreign countries to cooperate with us in the efforts to make this conference convene. It's not an easy task. It's a very tall order, but I hope that when the United States and the Russian Federation take this kind of initiative, the chances for success are there, and we will do everything in our power to use those chances and to make them realize.
At least 4 people were killed and 25 others wounded when a car bomb exploded near a Shia district in Baghdad, Iraq. The explosion comes a day after a wave of bombings in markets in Shia neighborhoods ripped across the capital. Due to a dozen blasts that have torn into markets and shopping areas and districts across the Iraqi capital, more than 70 people have already been killed and scores wounded in explosions that indicate a worsening in sectarian violence. Though no group has yet claimed responsibility for the blast, Sunni Muslim Islamist insurgents and Al-Qaeda's Iraqi wing have increased attacks since the beginning of the year, often targeting Shia districts. U.S. President Barack Obama paid tribute to fallen men and women of the U.S. Armed Services during a Memorial Day ceremony in which he reminded Americans that the country was still at war and pledged to remember military members' sacrifice. Unlike World War II or the Vietnam War, conflicts that touched nearly every American, Obama said today, most U.S. citizens were not directly affected by the military conflict overseas.
This truth cannot be ignored that today most Americans are not directly touched by war. As a consequence, not all Americans may always see or fully grasp the depth of sacrifice, the profound costs that are made in our name right now, as we speak, every day. Our troops and our military families understand this, and they mentioned to me their concern about whether the country fully appreciates what's happening.
And now for news around the world in brief. An Algiers criminal court has sentenced to 12 years in jail a doctor accused of kidnapping Algerian children born to single mothers and selling them for adoption in France. Khalifa Hanoути, accused of illegally shipping the children abroad with the help of a notary, must also pay a fine of 10,000 euros. The case first came to light when a young woman died in 2009 during an abortion at a clinic in the Algiers suburb of Ain Taya run by Hanoути. An investigation was launched. Prime Minister Julia Gillard of Australia has described as inaccurate a TV report claiming that several government institutions, including the country's main spy agency, fell victim to foreign cyber attacks. Australia's ABC television report, which did not name sources, had previously accused Chinese hackers of stealing confidential information from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which houses the overseas spy agency, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service. This comes a day after a U.S. report said designs for more than 24 major U.S. weapon systems have been compromised by Chinese hackers. And firefighters in eastern China rescued an abandoned newborn baby boy lodged in a sewage pipe directly beneath a toilet in a case which has sparked anger on social media sites. After residents reported the sound of a baby crying, firefighters had to remove the pipe and take it to a nearby hospital where doctors carefully cut around it to rescue the baby inside. The child is in a stable condition and the police are still looking for his parents. There are frequent reports in Chinese media of babies being abandoned, often shortly after birth. The problem attributed factors such as young mothers unaware they were pregnant. Those are the headlines of today. Let me remind you. On a military checkpoint in the eastern border town of Alsay leaves 3 soldiers dead, sparking anger from Lebanese politicians. Arab Democratic Party chief Rifat Ali Eid accuses President Michel Sleiman of failing to properly tackle the situation in the northern city of Tripoli. And Syria's opposition leaders react cautiously to a new EU decision that will end the arms embargo on Syrian rebels. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
المقاومة لا تستطيع أن تقف مكتوفة الأيدي ويكشف ظهرها.
ليس حزبا لبنانيا ولكنه فرقة إيرانية.